tuning in to see what we're cooking up in the kitchen this week. With all the rainy, nasty weather yesterday, and I think it's coming today too, I decided to make something a little comforting. It's a classic recipe, a classic combination. We're gonna be making our own homemade tomato soup with pantry items, and we're gonna be pairing it with a delicious, ooey gooey grilled cheese. So go gather all of your ingredients, go wash your hands, and we'll get started. So to kick off this meal, we're gonna start with our tomato soup. We're starting with that first because it takes about 40 minutes to simmer on your pot, and so you wanna make sure you give that enough time so your grilled cheese isn't cold. So the first thing I wanna tell you guys is that we are using canned tomatoes in this recipe. Typically, if this wasn't such special circumstances, I would use fresh tomatoes. If you have those on hand, you can go ahead and use them. I'm using a 28-ounce can of tomatoes. You'd probably want about 2 pounds if you're doing them from fresh. You also see here that I have some minced garlic. That's totally optional. You can also add in some basil, some shallots, some chives, whatever other seasonings you like in your tomato soup. You can also add in some spinach or some whole tomatoes, whatever it is that you want to do to give it more of a kick. So the first thing we're gonna do is slice up our onion. So you wanna hold your onion sideways and you wanna cut off first this little tip over here. So you're gonna cut down, and that way you have a way to lay it flat on your counter. And then you can cut down the middle. So for this recipe, we're gonna use only half of our onion. So we can leave the other half over there, throw away our trash, and we're just gonna peel the skin up. And then we'll start chopping. So a technique I will teach you is if you keep this attached and you just make slits down the sides, it's all staying together, you see? You do this throughout. All the way across. And now you have perfect angles. You can either chop them into small pieces like this, or you can just cut off the stem up here and you have nice big chunky wedges. For this recipe, make the onions the size you want. You're gonna be blending them up anyway. Okay, now that we've cut up our onions and we've opened our jar of tomato sauce, we can go ahead and add some olive oil to our pan. You can also use butter if that's what you prefer. I just like to eliminate dairy whenever I can. So you're gonna let this heat up a little bit, move it around, and when that gets hot, we're gonna add in our onions, our tomatoes, and some seasonings. When your oil or butter is nice and hot, and you can see when I flick a little water in it, they start to bubble, you can go ahead and add your onion, your water, give that a quick stir, and your can of tomatoes. You're gonna give it a big stir, and then you're gonna let it get to a simmer. As your soup starts to boil around the edges, you can go ahead and add in some seasonings. So I'm gonna do about a ½ tablespoon of garlic. Let's do a couple grinds of pepper and a couple grinds of salt. And I will tell you, tomatoes are a little more bitter than you think they're gonna be. And I am a very under-salter, but when it comes to tomato soup, you really need to over-salt it. But remember, less is more, and you can always add, but you can't take away. And Danny and I really like spicy tomato soup, so I'm also gonna add a couple shakes of this crushed red pepper. Like I said, you can add any seasonings you want. It's totally optional. So now I'm just gonna mix this all back up, and we're gonna let it sit for 40 minutes. So once it's been about 40 minutes and you stir it and it seems thicker and it's cooked out a lot of the water, you're gonna go ahead and blend it up. Now I have what's called an immersion blender, which means I just stick it in and hit the button a few times. If you don't have one of these, you can also add it to a regular blender. Just make sure to put a towel over the hole at the top of the lid so that it doesn't splash and get hot on you. I'm gonna go ahead and blend this up, and then we're gonna start our grilled cheese. Go ahead and prep my grilled cheese. So the first thing you should know is that you can make your grilled cheese as fancy as you want to. I like a pretty classic one, so I'm just using some wheat bread, some butter, and some sharp cheddar cheese. Now the first thing you're gonna do is you're gonna butter one slice of your bread. So you're just gonna spread some on the back end, and this is so that it gets that nice grilled look in the pan. Then, on your unbuttered slice, you're gonna put your amount of cheese. I'm gonna go ahead and do 2 slices. You're then gonna make it into a sandwich, and we're gonna bring it over to the stove. So to start your grilled cheese, you're just gonna add a little bit of your butter to the pan, maybe about a 1/4 tablespoon, if that even, and let that melt. Then you're gonna put your sandwich in the pan. Your piece of bread that you buttered is gonna be facing up. Let this sit for a couple minutes. Let the cheese start to melt. You can cover it if you'd like to, and we'll flip it in a couple minutes. You're then gonna take your sandwich and give it a flip. Ooh, look at that nice coloring. Press it down a little bit, and you can cover it back up and let it cook on the other side. Once the grilled cheese is nice and melty, you can transfer it over to your plate. We'll slice it up, we'll serve it with our soup, and we'll show you how it tastes. I'll take a little bit of the soup. That looks good. Slice it in half. Nice and gooey. I think I'll even have a pickle. I hope you guys enjoy your lunch, and I'll see you next time.